The objective of the lid lock test is to assess the condition of the lid assembly, make sure that the lid handle locks at pressures 3 psi and greater, make sure the lid handle remains locked until pressure drops to 1.7 psi or less, and verify if the existing pressure gauge is functioning. Start by removing the 4 screws that hold the lid cover on the fryer, and separate the lid cover from the lid by raising the handle and sliding the lid cover out through the handle. Visually inspect the pressure pin, lid lock assembly, and lid handle weldment for any broken or missing parts. If any of the aforementioned are true, stop, take the fryer out of service until a new lid assembly can be installed. Use the illustrations provided with the documentation as reference. Next, visually inspect for excessive oil migrating into the top of the lid through the lid lock assembly or any vent holes. This lid example has no excessive oil migration, and it will not need to be replaced unless it fails the locking pin engagement-disengagement procedure. Here are examples of lids that have excessive oil migration. They need to be replaced and the test fails. The store, however, will be able to continue to use this lid as long as it passes the lid lock engagement-disengagement procedure. Next, remove the existing pressure gauge and set this aside as it will be used for the test. Then, remove the reducer bushing. Make sure the plumbing is clear from obstruction between the pressure outlet and the fry pot to the pressure gauge. If oil buildup or obstructions are found, remove them by either cleaning the components or replacing the components prior to proceeding with the test. Then, thread the calibrated test gauge fixture into the existing T-fitting. Seal these threads with pipe thread sealant. Next, thread the existing pressure gauge into the test fixture. Seal these threads with pipe thread sealant as well. This gauge should be at 0. Clean and lube the pressure pin, locking pins, and linkage with spindle lube. Next, have the store bread and cook either a 4, 6, or 8 head load of original recipe in the pressure fryer, and then start the appropriate timer. As the pressure starts to rise, repeatedly slide a thin card between the right side of the lid handle weldment and the locking block. If you are able to slide the card between these two components, the lid is unlocked. When the card no longer slides between these two components, that is an indication that the locking pin has engaged the lid handle weldment and the lid is now locked. Record the pressure from the calibrated test gauge when this occurs. If the pressure reaches 3 psi or greater, yet the lid still remains unlocked, stop, take the fryer out of service until a new lid assembly is installed, and don't attempt to open the lid until the pressure gauge reads 0 psi. Pressure will continue to build during the test and should stop building around 12 psi. Verify that the existing pressure gauge is also showing pressure in a similar range. If not, this pressure gauge will need to be replaced with part number 16910 when reassembling the fryer. If pressure exceeds 12 psi during the test, finish the test and record the results. But afterwards, wait until all pressure safely exhausts from the fry pot, and then make sure the dead weight is clean and free from obstructions, as well as all associated plumbing. Depending on the cook load selected, pressure will release somewhere between the last 1 to 2 minutes of the cook load. As pressure releases, verify the pressure when the lid locking pin fully disengages the lid handle. This would be the point the lid is unlocked. To do this, use a thin card and repeatedly slide this between the locking block and the right side of the lid handle weldment. Once you are able to fully slide this business card between these two components, immediately note the pressure from the calibrated test gauge and record this number.
Right there, 1 1/4.
This is a point when the lid is unlocked. If this pressure was 1.7 psi or less, this lid passes inspection. If the pressure was greater than 1.7 psi, then this lid would fail inspection. Stop. Take this fryer out of service until the lid assembly can be replaced. If pressure doesn't drop below 1.7 psi when the timer reaches 0, wait for pressure to slowly release, but still record the results for when the lid unlocks. Then after the test, make sure the pressure solenoid is working freely, it is unobstructed, as well as all related pressure release plumbing. Have the store remove the product from the fryer. Remove the existing pressure gauge from the test fixture, and then remove the test fixture from the fryer. Replace the reducer in the T-fitting. Reinstall the existing pressure gauge if it passed inspection. Otherwise, replace it with 16910. Next, reinstall the lid cover.